They told you to chase power, chase money, chase women, but what if the real power begins when all of that chasing stops? Imagine a mind no longer hijacked by impulse, no longer enslaved by desire. What if the very thing society mocks as weakness is actually your greatest weapon? This is not about celibacy or moral high ground. This is about reclaiming the throne of your own psyche in a world that's quietly stripping you of it. Right now, somewhere deep within you, there's a version of yourself untouched by distraction, razor sharp, terrifyingly focused, and he's been waiting for you to wake up. Funny, isn't it? We've mastered smartphones, stock markets, even outer space, but most men haven't mastered their own mind. Stick with me, because by the end of this story, you'll either remember who you truly are, or you'll realize you never met him. In a world where instant gratification is only a click away, the modern man finds himself entangled in distractions that quietly steal his time, energy, and potential. Among these distractions, none is more cunning or more deeply rooted in the psyche than unchecked sexual impulse. It's not just about lust or desire, it's about the subtle, often invisible ways in which this impulse hijacks the mind. The pursuit of sexual validation has become a silent puppeteer, pulling the strings of behavior, motivation, and even ambition. But what happens when a man chooses to take control, to redirect that primal energy instead of letting it scatter him? The result is a profound transformation, a sharpening of the mind, a calm strength that separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. The power of sexual energy is immense. It is the force that creates life, the biological drive that ensures the survival of our species. But when left ungoverned, it becomes a distraction, a never-ending hunger that fogs the mind. Every time a man indulges impulsively, whether through mindless scrolling, empty encounters, or obsessive fantasy, he leaks a piece of his mental sovereignty. He loses clarity, momentum, and drive. It's not just time he's giving away, it's his edge, his focus, his presence. This is not a moral argument, it's a psychological one. When the mind is consumed with fantasy and stimulation, it has little room for depth, for creativity, for clarity. And yet most men are never told this truth. They're told to indulge, to explore, to be free. But what if that freedom is a trap? There is an ancient wisdom echoed across spiritual disciplines, philosophical schools, and even modern psychology that points to one profound truth. The man who can master his impulses gains access to a deeper, more powerful version of himself. This doesn't mean suppression, it means redirection. It means taking that same energy and turning it inward, using it to fuel vision, discipline, and execution. A desexualized mind doesn't mean a deadened mind. It means a liberated one. It means the man is no longer a slave to dopamine. He sees the game for what it is. He is no longer manipulated by marketing that sells sex, no longer controlled by algorithms that prey on his instincts, no longer distracted by the illusion that fulfillment lies in chasing momentary pleasure. He becomes dangerous, in the best sense of the word, because he becomes unpredictable, focused, immune to the usual traps. Think about the most productive moments of your life. Think about when you felt most creative, most grounded, most unstoppable. Chances are, those moments didn't happen after a night of indulgence or a week of binging mindless content. They happened when your mind was still, when your energy wasn't scattered, when you were directed like a laser beam. That is the state of a man who is in control of his sexual impulse. He's not suppressing it, he's channeling it. Just like water, which when left uncontrolled floods and destroys, but when channeled can generate power, irrigate fields, and build civilizations, sexual energy, when mastered, becomes a force that transforms a man into his highest version. What makes this mastery so rare is that the world constantly rewards indulgence. It sells us the idea that pleasure equals happiness, that constant stimulation is success. But that's a lie dressed in dopamine. The truth is, pleasure without purpose weakens the mind. It trains you to seek instead of create, to consume instead of build. A man who cannot sit with himself without needing a hit of stimulation is not free. He is addicted. And addiction, no matter how socially accepted, always has a cost. The cost here is your potential. It's your ability to sit in silence and listen to your own intuition. It's your ability to push through resistance, to build something meaningful, to stand firm in the face of temptation. That strength, that inner steel, is forged not in indulgence, but in discipline. Ironically, when a man takes control of his sexual impulse, his attraction multiplies. Not just sexual attraction from others, but life's attraction to him. Opportunities arise, confidence sharpens, his presence deepens. Why? Because he is no longer scattered. He walks into a room and he is fully there. Not half distracted, not half fantasizing, not energetically drained. People can feel that. It's rare, it's magnetic, it's the kind of presence that doesn't need to speak loudly because the silence carries weight. The modern man is told to chase women, but the man who stops chasing often becomes the one they chase. Not because he plays games, but because he has become whole within himself. This mastery also brings emotional clarity. Without the fog of constant stimulation, the mind begins to settle. Thoughts become clearer, emotions become manageable. Patterns that were once unconscious begin to rise to the surface. He sees the cycles he's been trapped in, how he sought validation, how he mistook lust for love, how he used pleasure to avoid pain. And in seeing it, he breaks the cycle. He doesn't numb, he heals. He doesn't chase, he creates. And from this space, he begins to operate from true freedom. Not the freedom to indulge, but the freedom to choose consciously. What happens when millions of men begin to make this shift? What happens when they start showing up with full presence, full clarity, full power? They build better businesses. They become better fathers, better leaders, better creators. Society changes, not because laws were passed, but because men remembered who they are. The desexualized mind isn't about becoming less of a man, it's about becoming more focused, more intentional, more alive. It's the reclamation of energy that was always yours, stolen by noise, now returned to purpose. In today's hyper-stimulated culture, the male identity is increasingly measured by external achievements. How attractive your partner is, how many likes your post gets, how often you win approval, attention or desire. The modern man is encouraged, even conditioned, to seek validation not from within but from others, especially through sexual conquest or desirability. Every advertisement, social media trend, and influencer culture reinforces this idea that worth is earned through admiration and attraction. But what if that entire foundation is a lie? What if the strongest, most unshakable version of a man isn't the one constantly receiving attention, but the one who no longer needs it? This is where the desexualized mind begins its quiet revolution, by no longer begging the world to tell him who he is. The man who begins to desexualize his mind doesn't become numb or disconnected from his masculinity. He refines it, he reclaims it. When his attention no longer revolves around being desired, seducing others, or maintaining the illusion of desirability, something extraordinary happens. He starts to look inward. He begins to build from the inside out. The noise quiets, the pressure eases, and in that silence, he meets a new version of himself. One not driven by applause, but by alignment. The man no longer needs to perform. He no longer measures himself by his body count or how much he is wanted. He measures himself by the depth of his peace, the strength of his discipline, and the sharpness of his purpose. External validation fades into the background, replaced by something far more powerful: internal certainty. When a man is ruled by his need for external sexual validation, he becomes reactive. He adjusts his behavior to fit in, to attract, to impress. He dresses not for himself, but for how he will be seen. He speaks not from truth, but from what he thinks will be approved. He loses the authenticity that makes his voice powerful. But the moment he detaches from that craving, he becomes free. He stops chasing attention and starts commanding respect, not because he demands it, but because his presence is rooted in something deeper than image. He doesn't need the world to want him, he wants the truth. And the truth gives him a foundation that no trend, no rejection, no opinion can shake. This internal validation leads to an unshakable inner strength. It allows the man to walk away from situations that don't serve him, to say no when everyone else is saying yes, to wait when gratification demands he act now. In a society that celebrates impulsiveness and instant satisfaction, this kind of restraint looks like rebellion, but it's not rebellion, it's mastery. The desexualized mind doesn't mean a life without pleasure or connection. It means a life where pleasure no longer controls him. He enjoys, but he's not addicted. He connects, but he's not dependent. He can walk alone without loneliness because he has built a relationship with himself that is richer than the shallow noise of constant approval. This kind of strength is not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It shows up in moments of challenge, when temptation calls, when shortcuts present themselves, when validation is dangled like bait. The desexualized man sees these for what they are, tests, not of his manhood, but of his alignment. And each time he chooses discipline over indulgence, clarity over chaos, intention over impulse, he reinforces that inner foundation. Over time, the world begins to notice, not because he is trying to be seen, but because authenticity always rises. He becomes a force, not because he tries to dominate, but because he refuses to be dominated by desire, by expectation, or by social programming. It's ironic that in a culture obsessed with empowerment, true empowerment is found in doing the opposite of what everyone is doing. While others chase attention, he chases meaning. While others drown in distraction, he sharpens his focus. While others seek comfort in fleeting pleasure, he finds strength in discomfort. He does not run from the silence, he runs toward it. And in that silence, he uncovers the parts of himself that are not conditioned by media, society, or past wounds. He becomes sovereign. A man who doesn't need the world to validate him is a man who can walk into any room, any challenge, any crisis, and remain himself. The desexualized mind also creates space for higher pursuits. It redirects energy into creation, learning, discipline, and service. The energy once wasted in endless loops of fantasy, validation-seeking, or compulsive behavior is now harnessed. He starts writing that book, building that business, mastering that skill, deepening that connection, not because it gets him anything, but because it fulfills something within him. And that fulfillment is sustainable. It doesn't crash with the next disappointment or the next rejection. It doesn't depend on who texts back or who approves. It's self-generated, self-renewing, and this kind of fulfillment builds momentum. It builds a life of substance, not just surface. There is also emotional clarity in this state of mind. When a man no longer filters his self-worth through the lens of sexual attention, he starts to see people more clearly, not as objects or trophies or reflections of his value, but as human beings. He listens better, he connects deeper. His relationships become grounded in presence, not performance. He begins to choose partners, friends, and mentors based on alignment, not image. And this shift transforms the quality of his interactions. He gives without needing. He loves without losing himself. He leads without manipulating. The desexualized mind, by removing the fog of compulsive desire, clears the path for real connection, real leadership, and real legacy. Perhaps most important of all, the desexualized mind builds an internal compass. It teaches the man to know what is right for him, not what is popular, not what is trending, but what aligns with his soul. This compass doesn't come from a book or a course. It comes from experience, from choosing truth over temptation, from choosing depth over distraction, from choosing growth over gratification. Each of these choices builds confidence, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that knows. And when a man knows who he is, what he stands for, and what he will not compromise, he becomes immovable, not hard or rigid, but grounded, flexible but firm, open yet unbreakable. There is a quiet strength in a man who can say no, not out of fear or suppression, but out of deep alignment with his purpose. In a world that encourages indulgence at every turn, consume more, experience more, give in to every desire, the man who practices restraint becomes a rare and powerful force. True masculine power does not scream for attention, nor does it chase every impulse that flickers through the mind. It is not found in domination or in accumulating pleasures. It is forged in the fire of discipline, in the ability to control one's instincts without killing them. Restraint is not weakness, it is the ultimate display of control. It is power over the self, and from that place, power over one's life follows. Indulgence is easy, it is the default. It takes no effort to say yes to another distraction, another craving, another hit of dopamine. But restraint demands consciousness. It demands that a man pause, reflect, and choose. It is the space between stimulus and response where power is born. When a man learns to hold that space, when he can stand in the middle of desire and still decide with clarity, he gains something that indulgence can never offer: respect for himself. Not the shallow respect that comes from others, but the deep, lasting kind that grows when he knows he is not at the mercy of his urges. In the modern world, indulgence is marketed as freedom. But what kind of freedom leaves a man dependent on constant stimulation to feel alive? The endless scrolling, the endless chasing, the endless needing, it traps the mind in a loop where satisfaction is always just out of reach. The man who indulges without thought becomes a slave to his senses. He cannot sit still, cannot focus, cannot build anything lasting because his attention is scattered. Every impulse pulls him in a new direction, leaving him exhausted and empty. And yet, this is what many are told to aspire to: a life of ease, comfort, and gratification. But there is nothing powerful about comfort when it costs you your focus, your clarity, and your ability to lead. Restraint, on the other hand, is not about self-denial for its own sake. It is about choosing long-term strength over short-term pleasure. It is about knowing when to act and when to hold back. The man who lives with restraint is not void of desire. He is simply not ruled by it. He can feel the pull of temptation and still stay rooted in purpose. He can experience emotion without being consumed by it. He can walk through a world filled with distraction and stay focused on what truly matters. That kind of presence is magnetic. It draws others not through force, but through gravity. People trust a man who doesn't need to prove himself. They sense that he is anchored, that he knows who he is and what he stands for. This kind of strength cannot be faked. It is built through practice, through the quiet decisions made when no one is watching. It is built when a man chooses to work instead of procrastinate, to stay instead of escape, to listen instead of react. These small acts of restraint compound into something immense. They create a life that is solid, intentional, and unshakable. And as the man continues to practice restraint, he begins to see through the illusions that once controlled him. He sees that indulgence offers fleeting highs but lasting emptiness. He sees that power is not in taking everything, but in needing nothing. He sees that the ability to walk away, to wait, to pause, to choose, is where real authority lives. In relationships, restraint creates depth. The man who does not rush to possess or conquer is the man who truly sees. He listens with presence, acts with intention, and connects with authenticity. His restraint makes space for others to feel safe, to open, to trust. He is not chasing validation or using charm to manipulate. He is grounded, and that grounding allows for real intimacy. Indulgence is loud, fast, and surface level. Restraint is quiet, patient, and profound. It reveals character, not performance. It builds bonds based on truth, not illusion. In leadership, restraint is the difference between reaction and wisdom. The leader who indulges in power becomes a tyrant. The one who restrains his ego and listens, reflects, and acts with discipline earns loyalty. People follow not because they are afraid, but because they respect his clarity and composure. He does not need to control others because he controls himself. His restraint becomes a model, showing others what it means to act from strength rather than insecurity. He creates environments where people grow, where decisions are made with thought, and where direction is rooted in vision, not emotion. Even in creativity and ambition, restraint plays a critical role. The man who chases every idea finishes none. The man who indulges in every opportunity spreads himself too thin to succeed. But the man who practices restraint, who chooses the one thing and sees it through, builds something lasting. His focus becomes a superpower. His ability to say no becomes the force that fuels his yes. He is not distracted by comparison or competition because he knows his path. Restraint gives him clarity, and with clarity comes momentum. He moves with purpose because he is not pulled by chaos. There is a dignity in restraint that indulgence can never touch. It creates a quiet confidence that does not need to be loud. It is felt in how a man carries himself, in how he looks into your eyes, in how he speaks, how he listens, how he waits. It is not passive, it is potent. Like a storm held back by calm, like fire kept warm in the hearth, restraint channels energy rather than wasting it. It is this channeling, this deliberate holding and directing that creates mastery. Mastery over behavior, mastery over time, mastery over emotion, and eventually mastery over life itself. The world may mock restraint because it does not understand it. It confuses silence for weakness, patience for indecision, and discipline for repression. But those who have tasted real strength know better. They know that the man who can hold his ground, who can endure discomfort, who can stay the course, this man is rare. He does not need to impress, to win, or to take. He is enough, and because he knows that, he becomes a force that others can lean on, look up to, and learn from. Modern society is built on desire, not just acknowledging it, but actively stoking it, feeding it, inflaming it until it consumes. Everywhere you look, something is whispering that you are not enough unless you have more, do more, experience more. Advertisements don't sell products, they sell longing. Social media doesn't connect people, it compares lives. Entertainment doesn't just distract, it programs hunger for what others have. From morning until night, the mind is barraged with signals that say, want this, crave this, chase this. This is not accidental, it's design, because a mind ruled by desire is easy to control, easy to sell to, easy to manipulate. It's a mind always reaching outward, never grounded inward. Desire itself is not the enemy. It is natural to want. But when desire becomes the axis of life, everything else begins to distort around it. The moment you begin to believe that happiness lies just beyond the next purchase, the next relationship, the next promotion, you hand over your power. You become a puppet dancing for the next hit of satisfaction, brief as it may be. Society profits off this cycle. It teaches you to chase shadows, beauty that fades, status that's hollow, validation that evaporates the moment it's questioned. And while you chase, society feeds. It gets richer as you grow emptier. True freedom is not found in indulging every desire, but in understanding it, and eventually transcending it. When you begin to observe your impulses instead of acting on them blindly, something shifts. You start to see the mechanisms behind the curtain. You begin to realize that most of what you thought you wanted was programmed into you. You wanted success because you thought it would make you lovable. You wanted sex because you thought it would make you powerful. You wanted wealth because you thought it would make you safe. But once those things arrive, the emptiness remains. It's never about the object of desire, it's about the feeling you think it will deliver. And often that feeling is something you had the power to access all along. Freedom begins when you no longer believe every desire deserves your action. When you stop being a slave to the dopamine rush. When you stop mistaking stimulation for fulfillment. The man who can sit with desire without acting on it is not repressed. He is free. He is the rare one who sees the trap and steps around it. He does not demonize pleasure, but he doesn't bow to it either. He chooses when to indulge, and even more powerfully, when not to. He doesn't fear missing out because he is no longer looking outward for his identity. His value is not tied to what he consumes or acquires. His worth is rooted in being, not having. Modern society creates the illusion that fulfillment lies in abundance, but real fulfillment comes from clarity. The man chasing every desire is spread thin. He lacks center. He is constantly pulled in different directions, reacting instead of acting. But the man who has transcended the need to satisfy every urge becomes sharp, focused, present. He begins to create rather than consume. His attention is no longer hijacked by algorithms and trends. He uses tools without being used by them. He makes decisions not based on impulse, but on intention. And in doing so, he begins to reclaim what most have lost, the ability to choose his life rather than be swept along by it. The mind trained to transcend desire is not emotionless, it is sovereign. It feels fully, but it chooses wisely. It still recognizes beauty, connection, ambition, but not as a source of identity or salvation. These things become expressions of a full life, not substitutes for one. This is a radical shift. It breaks the cycle of endless seeking. It reveals that peace was never in the next thing, but in the space between desires, the silence most never reach because they're too busy trying to fill it. That silence is not emptiness, it is potential. It is where true creativity, insight, and power are born. And yet, society fears this kind of individual, because a man who doesn't need is hard to manipulate. He's not swayed by trends, not baited by outrage, not shaken by public opinion. He doesn't need the approval of the masses, so he cannot be controlled by them. He does not chase, so he cannot be led astray. His presence becomes disruptive, not through noise, but through stillness. In a world addicted to more, he is content. In a world that fears silence, he is quiet. In a world obsessed with self-image, he is invisible and unshakable. That kind of man is not just free, he is dangerous to the system. But transcending desire doesn't happen by accident. It requires work, awareness, patience. It means sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. It means facing the parts of yourself that are terrified of not having, not being, not achieving. It means recognizing the pain beneath the craving, the childhood wound, the unspoken shame, the inherited beliefs. When you pull desire up by the roots, you often find fear, and facing that fear is the doorway to transformation. You stop running, you stop covering, you meet yourself in raw form, and that meeting is where real strength is born. When desire no longer drives you, what remains is clarity. You start to see what truly matters, not what looks good, not what gets applause, but what feels aligned. You begin to pursue less, but go deeper. Your goals become cleaner, your actions more potent. You no longer move because you're restless. You move because you're ready. You no longer speak to impress, you speak to connect. You no longer live to escape, you live to expand. Every moment is no longer a chase, it becomes a choice. You become fully present, not because there's nothing to want, but because you are no longer defined by wanting. In that presence, you discover a power deeper than desire, purpose. Purpose does not flare and fade like desire. It is steady, enduring. It roots you when chaos surrounds you. It whispers when the world shouts. It guides you not through seduction, but through stillness. When you live from purpose, desires become tools, not masters. They support the mission. They do not replace it. You begin to use your gifts, your time, your energy with precision. You don't waste your life reacting. You build, you serve, you evolve. You become the rare man who has stopped chasing smoke and started forging fire.